the change from moving to district-based elections from at-large elections for the city council members. So in a moment, Karen McDonald is going to come up. She's the independent demographer who the city has hired to lead us through this process. She's not a city employee. She's an independent individual who's coming on board to help guide us through this in a non-political way. And in addition to that, we do have translation services available. Jesus Villasenor, who's located in the back with the blue shirt and the blue tie, is available if you do need translation services. He'll be sitting in the left-hand corner over there if you guys need that. Additionally, if you wish to speak later on, we're going to have a public comment period. I've handed most of you a green card, and if you wish to fill that out and turn it back into myself at any point in time during the meeting, that'll allow you to have the opportunity to speak. And if you're hungry or thirsty, we have cookies and water in the back. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Karen McDonald. She'll go from here.
I am going to take this off. Can I walk around?
Sure.
Okay. This always makes me feel like I'm a talk show host or something, you know? This is fine. This is fine. That would even be worse. Anyway, thank you so much for coming, everybody. Again, my name is Karen McDonald. This is my colleague, Jamie Clark, and we're with a little consulting shop called Q2 Data and Research, and we do districting and elections consulting. Thank you very much for coming. I am going to go through this PowerPoint that some of you have seen already, some of you have seen part of it, and many of you will probably be able to give this PowerPoint pretty much by the next or the meeting after that. So I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and everybody knows what we're doing here, so we can all have an educated conversation about, you know, districting and how to get to the districts and all of that. So, you know, you're not going to need all of this information all the time, but it's always good to know what's going on, where it all comes from, have it in the back of your mind. And, you know, if you find it particularly fascinating, you know, may want to get involved when the state goes through its redistricting, which is very soon after the next census is collected. And there's actually a Citizens Redistricting Commission that you can apply to, and you get to sit through a lot of meetings and you actually get paid for it. So there you go. Here's my pitch, and let's start with this presentation. So districting in Oceanside, how does it work and how do we participate? What is districting? So why are we here? Districting, of course, which most of you know, and by the way, over here, you can't see it, that's what I figured, okay. So I'm gonna go, how about I'll go over here, and you guys can all see this, and, okay. If anybody needs to see me, tell me to stand up, okay? All right, so what is districting? In a district-based electoral system, representatives are elected from districts. So right now what you all have is an at-large system, right? So you don't have individual districts where the representatives have to actually live. Districting is the process of drawing the boundaries that divide the city's population into 4 districts. And that's, of course, what we're trying to do here. The city has implemented a transparent public process to draw the districts. And that is, of course, why we're all sitting here. This is not smoky back rooms. This is actually transparent. Everything will be done in public. You can participate in every aspect of this. The only thing that Jamie and I do that's not in public is basically things like digitizing your community of interest testimony, things like that, making sure that all of the geography is assigned, and then, you know, writing a lot of memos and running reports and things like that. So if passed by the City Council, these districts will go into effect with the November 2018 election. How will this process work? Well, we're in the middle of the process already. This is our 2nd community meeting. So the 2 public meetings today and then last Saturday were strictly held to gather public input. Then tomorrow there is a City Council hearing where you can, if you feel like it, or if somebody else wants to come, also present input and gather more. We're going to gather more public input there. And then we will have 3 more public meetings on May 20, that is this Saturday, and then the 23rd and the 30th to gather input, feedback, and work on a draft map. So starting on Saturday, the format of these meetings will change a little bit. Again, we're going to start, I will probably again go through this PowerPoint. Maybe I'll go a little bit faster, depending on, how many people have seen it already. And we'll again take a break, which is what we're going to do today after the PowerPoint, gather around the maps. You take a look at the maps, figure out your input perhaps, fill out some of these forms, give them back to us, and then after the break, we will have a basically open mic, and fill out a speaker form, and then tell us what your input is. And Jamie, my colleague, will try to show on a map what areas people are talking about, and we'll zoom in so we all understand and get on the same page about what the community of interest is, and what the area of interest is that somebody's talking about. And then after that, we're going to start putting some districts together based on the input that was already received, and of course keeping all the other districting criteria in mind also. So it's actually pretty exciting, and if you've never seen how this works, it's pretty fascinating. And I know some of you already are hooked, so I hope to see all of you there. 20th, 23rd, 30th, we'll gather input, feedback, and then work on the draft map. And on June 14th, or sooner, we'll release the draft districting plan. So that's basically what we all came up with. On the 21st, we'll go back to City Council and then present that draft map to the City Council, explain to them all what went into it, why do the districts look the way that they do, what communities of interest are accounted for, how is the population equality and all of that happening, and so forth. And then the City Council may modify in public if they feel like some changes should be made, also probably based on public input, and we'll see what happens. On July 25th, so we'll have a break, the map will of course be on our website, on the city's website. We have a specialized web page set up. You can see the draft map there, and on July 25th, there will be a reading of an ordinance, so that's the first reading of the ordinance, and then if all goes well, then on August 1, there will be a vote on that ordinance. So, and that pretty much summarizes the entire process, which you can see is very fast. Okay, so when and where are the meetings? Saturday, we were at Balderrama. Today, we're here at El Corazon. And Saturday, we're at Bishop Recreation Center. Tuesday, the 23rd, at Lake Elementary School. On Tuesday, May 30th, we're in the library community rooms downtown. And the City Council hearings, of course, are all in City Hall. And let's go over the mapping criteria really quickly. We have 5 criteria that are used for drawing districts here, and they're very similar in other jurisdictions also. The first 2 are really non-negotiable because they're just not. They're constitutional and so forth. So it's equal population in compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act, which we sometimes refer to as the VRA or the federal VRA. Then there's contiguity, compactness, respect for communities of interest, and then finally we have the non-mapping criterion, and that is disregard incumbents, candidates, and political parties. So we don't want to know where people live, we don't want to know party interests, let's not talk about that in these meetings here. We basically, it basically prevents intentional harm or intentional benefit, and that's what people always complain about, is that somebody gets a district drawn. So let's keep that out of here so, we can draw districts based on our communities. Okay. I'm going to go through these criteria really quickly, one by one. So the first and second criteria, equal population in the Federal Voting Rights Act. Basically, 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, is interpreted. When I say interpreted, of course, there's so many cases, court cases out there that interpret all of these things. So it's been interpreted to require reasonably equal district populations. And that's sometimes what you hear referred to as one person, one vote. So basically, if you have one district that has 100 people in it and the next district has 1,000 people in it, then that is not equal, So basically, in the smaller district, people's vote has more weight than in the larger district. It prohibits intentional discrimination because it's a violation of equal protection. The jurisdiction is treating residents differently because of race and thus not according them equal protection under the law. And then there's the 15th Amendment, which bans racial discrimination in voting, and that gets us to our ideal population. So what's the ideal population then? Ideal population is always computed the same way. So you take the jurisdiction. For us, jurisdiction is City of Oceanside, right? So then you look up the census population for the City of Oceanside, and then you divide it by the number of districts that you want to draw. So that's the same for state of California. For example, if you want to figure out how many people should be in an assembly district, you take total population for state of California, you divide it by 80, and then you have your ideal population for an assembly district. So here we have 4 districts. Our population is 167,340, and this is the population from the last census. So it's a little aged. So the population here we all know has gone up. But you have to use the last census count, which is the census that is collected in the year ending with 0. Okay, April 1 is Census Day. That's always what you have to use because that's the only time that we in the US actually count everybody. Everything else is an estimate. So this is the only count. So what we get is districts that should be 41,835. We call that the ideal population. Now, how equal is equal? Do you really have to be that precise? Well, there's different standards for different jurisdictions. Like congressional districts, they're held to what's called strict scrutiny. And that just means that you really don't have any wiggle room. You have to be within 1 or 2 or 3 people, and otherwise you're going to get in trouble and somebody's probably going to sue you. Lower level districts have a little bit more flexibility. And when we talk about reasonable equality, that means that there is a little bit of deviation from the mean that is allowable. So generally, we have had some guidance from, Department of Justice and so forth. They use plus or minus 5%, and that seems to be a pretty good rule of thumb. So that means for us, we have our ideal population, 41,835, and then we have the wiggle room of about 2,000 something people that we can be above or below that. So, next criterion, Federal Voting Rights Act. It prohibits the denial or abridgment of voting rights on the basis of race or language minority status. And race, of course, we know, black, white. Federal Voting Rights Act defines language minority as Asian, Native American, Alaskan Native, or Spanish heritage. And that does not apply to other language groups. So, if you don't fall into that particular group, first I picked on French speakers, then Norwegians. Let's take Swedes this time. So if you're speaking Swedish, you're not going to be protected under the Federal Voting Rights Act, okay, as a language minority. It prohibits practices that have the purpose or effect of discriminating on the basis of race or language minority status. And it applies nationwide to all jurisdictions that conduct elections. So this is not something that just happens to apply in California or in Oceanside or in San Diego County. It's everywhere. It doesn't matter where. And actually, if you Google redistricting, because usually it's a redistricting where the stuff comes up, or Voting Rights Act lawsuits, you will find dozens of them. There are still Voting Rights Act lawsuits that are being decided from the last redistricting that happened in the year ending with 0, okay? There is a Wisconsin case right now, there's Texas cases right now, and they're all up in the Supreme Court, and it's pretty exciting times for the Voting Rights Act these days. So, all right, so Federal Voting Rights Act and districting the big things in the Voting Rights Act, there is a lot of different sections in the Voting Rights Act, okay? So the one that, the sections that really apply to districting have to do with vote dilution. And what the courts say is that electoral systems can limit the ability to elect a candidate of choice by a protected class of voters. And the protected class is the people that we just talked about, which is basically race and language minority status, in various ways. For example, you could have an at-large election system that can make it impossible for even a large minority group to elect a candidate of choice when the majority votes against them. So for example, you have, let's just say you have, 35% of a protected minority. Let's say you have 35% blacks in a jurisdiction that has otherwise just white people. And whites and blacks really vote completely differently. It's in an at-large system where everybody gets the same ballot. It's going to be really, really difficult for the minority group to actually, elect somebody because everybody is on the same ballot. If you have districts, then that makes it a little bit easier because you could draw the districts in a way that the minority group actually can elect somebody that may represent them. So that's essentially what vote dilution is about. Single-member districts can be drawn in ways that minimize voters' ability to elect a candidate of choice. And that is about when you're drawing your districts, and you're drawing them, once you go to districts, still in a way that the minority still can't elect somebody. So for example, you have your 35% blacks, and then you slice them up into 4 different districts, and then they can still not elect somebody who will represent them. So that is also not something that is legal, actually, and you can get challenged for that. So systems that limit the ability to elect in this way, systems that limit ability to elect in this way are said to dilute minority voting strength. Next, please. So Section 2 in districting. Methods of vote dilution, I've already talked about this pretty much. There's 2 terms that we hear a lot, and they are packing and cracking. So basically, packing is if you put everybody in one district, so that you have too many of the minority members in one district, and cracking is when you divide up a politically viable population concentration so it doesn't constitute a majority in any district. And by the way, this is also stuff that people that do partisan redistricting, they do this also with partisan concerns. So basically, divvy up the Democrats if they can't elect somebody, or when the Democrats are in charge, then they divvy up the Republicans so that they can't elect somebody. So this isn't something that only happens with race and ethnicity. It's just that Democrats and Republicans are not protected by the Federal Voting Rights Act. So, all right. Race and districting. So we've talked a lot about, race and language minority status, but then we also heard from the courts that race cannot be the predominant criterion in line drawing. So what they were saying is you have to be weighing your concerns here. Race should not subjugate traditional districting principles, and those are compactness, contiguity, and communities of interest, for example, and those are also our districting criteria that we have for the city of Oceanside. So we'll talk about those. So basically, it's all about balance. Next, please. So next criterion is compactness, and that's pretty straightforward, you would think, but it isn't. It addresses the geography of the district, and there is many, many different ways to measure this. So there's statistical formulas, and we always joke about what happens right before redistricting at statistics conferences. If you are an academic, it actually gets pretty entertaining because everybody in statistics seems to think that they have a new measure to measure compactness. So they all go to the conferences and they're all, presenting their new compactness measures, only to find out that somebody else already came up with that like 20 years ago. So there's literally hundreds of different ways of measuring compactness. I mean, people come up with, you measure from one end to the other end, you measure the circumference, you look at the density. I mean, there's pretty much anything you can think of, there is a formula for it. And then it gets to the Supreme Court. And the highlight for an academic is to be cited in a Supreme Court ruling. I tell you, that is it, nirvana, right? And then it gets to the Supreme Court, and they look at this and they go, well, you don't really want to hear about all these formulas. It looks funny, though, you know, so we know if it's compact or not just by looking at it. So basically, the rule of thumb is, does it look funny? If it looks funny, then somebody else may actually take another look at it and figure out if you did something funny. And by funny, we mean, you know, violate one of the criteria, most likely. So basically, the eyeball approach is pretty popular, and appearances do matter. Contiguity. This one is actually pretty straightforward. So the definition is that a contiguous district is one in which all the parts are connected to each other. In other words, if you can travel from any one location to any other location within the district without crossing the district boundary, then you're good. So no districts in 3 different pieces, even though, you know, that may serve a particular purpose, can't do it. All right, and then finally, communities of interest. Council districts shall respect communities of interest as much as practicable. Communities of interest generally refers to a contiguous population, so basically in one piece, right, which shares common social and economic interests. Interestingly enough, with all the data that we have from everybody, the census and whatnot, there really are no data sets available to really define communities of interest. I mean, you could say, okay, well, maybe all poor people are a community of interest. Well, the courts have said, well, maybe you're just stereotyping a little bit, you know? Maybe all poor people are not the same, you know? Or maybe all people that live at the beach are not the same, or, you know, just because people look the same, they're not the same. So the best way to find out what a community of interest is to ask people. So who defines a community of interest for Oceanside? That would be all of you. It's defined by those familiar with the community, and the law really does not limit the kinds of interests that may bind a community. So it's basically up to those who live or work in the community to let us know what the interests are and, you know, just basically establish the interests that unite it. The interests don't have to be limited to a current situation, but they can also include goals. So what are you working on for the future? And the city really needs your input to define communities of interest, because otherwise we just won't know. I'm going to give you some examples really quickly in these 2 broad categories, but again, you know, just because it's not here doesn't mean that is not a community of interest that you have, okay? So, current situation could be, for example, you're working on common employment, or, I mean, you have common employment or economic opportunities, for example. You know, sometimes you get into communities and everybody's working for one particular company, and that's a really big deal. Like, you know, up in Northern California, we have some communities that all work for a refinery, and then everybody who lives there, you know, kind of has the same interest. They're really interested in keeping the refinery going and whatnot. So common employment is a big one. You know, here you're at Camp Pendleton, there may be something like that. Goals, expanding opportunities perhaps, development, bringing in businesses or jobs. Social interests could be what we hear a lot, people organizing around schools, culture, transportation, and parks. So I always use this one example for transportation. In my neighborhood, there was a proposal to put a Greyhound bus depot, and we don't have the best air quality already, and boy, that took about 2.5 minutes for us to all get really, really organized. So that was definitely a community of interest, and yeah, you better didn't come in there and say you were going to chop us up into 4 different districts. So, you know, it's things like that, but you'll know because you live here. Goals could be improving recreational opportunities, like people are working on, you know, a rec center or something, or maybe public safety. That's also something we hear a lot. Preserving historic resources, if you have, for example, an old downtown or something like that. Okay. And how do you do that? How do you document a community of interest? It's pretty straightforward, and you all have these handouts, and you see that there's three questions on pretty much every handout, and there's also an explanatory handout. So you don't have to fill it out every time you come here. You don't have to fill it out at all. I mean, we'd love for you to fill it out. But, you know, if you could just take the time and just talk about your community. Outline what defines your community of interest, you know? What is your mission or commonality? And sometimes it really helps to think about it if you're stuck a little bit. Think about what's different outside of your community from your community. Like sometimes you know that there's maybe like a big street and on the other side of the street everything changes, you know, it's just different from what's going on within your community. If that's the case, that's a really easy one because then you know that that's where your border is, you know. So we really need to know these two questions for sure. So what bounds your community? So basically, how are you organized? And then where is your community located in the city? So you can create a map of the boundaries, like you can use Google Maps, for example. There's a handout on the city's website that explains how to do that. It's a free mapping program, so if you have a little bit of time, you could do that. You could, if you have access to a, an expensive mapping program, you can of course use that. But you can also just draw something on paper or just outline it just by writing down the streets. Just let us know where it is. And the more detail you can give us, the better for Jamie, who has to sit there at night and actually digitize all of this. She will be very happy if you're very detailed. So next. And then finally, just ignore politics. We talked about it briefly. Disregard the location of incumbents and candidates as well as the interests of political parties. So we don't want to know where anybody lives. I don't want to know that anybody wants to, run for office. And just keep it out of these public meetings, please. And we know that many of you know these things, but please, let's just not talk about it. And please disregard political parties. So finally, why should you participate? I think you have probably figured this out already, but if you need some talking points to talk to your neighbors, really to make sure that we know about your community of interest, to give your community a voice and make sure it has equal access to the political process, to encourage citizens to register, vote, and remain politically engaged, and to help shape a districting plan that provides communities a meaningful opportunity to elect candidates who represent their interests on issues that are important to their lives. Next, please. Thank you. How to get involved, how to learn more, to participate, please, testify, provide your input, you can submit written testimonies and supporting information to the city, please. You can provide information about your community of interest or other topics the city needs to know about as soon as possible, please. The final deadline for comments to be considered for the draft maps is May 30, because that's our last date to actually come up with the draft map, so earlier is always better. But, after that, we basically have the first draft map, so it will be good to really hear about your communities before then, or just general ideas about what these districts should look like. So it doesn't have to be just communities of interest, okay? Submit information at a hearing, of course. You can mail it to us. You can drop it off at the city clerk's office at City Hall. We have an email set up, and I'm really looking forward to all of you using it. It's called districtelections@ci.oceanside.ca.us. And you can get information online just by going to the City of Oceanside homepage, and the first clickable link there is districting. And there is a lot of different handouts and documents. They are even translated if you have some neighbors that don't speak English well. So you can print them out, maybe direct them to that. There's a whole lot more information than what we just gave you here. There's frequently asked questions, there's terminology, translations, because I know there's a lot of terminology that floats around here. So, and definitely thank you so much for participating. Thank you for spending your evening with us. We really appreciate it. So what we'll do now is we will take a little break. So maybe 15, 20 minutes or so. There is 4 map stations around the room. Take a look at these maps, take your handouts, find your community, talk to your neighbors, and maybe just write down where your communities of interest are, or prepare your public input, and then we'll gather back here and we'll take your input. Also, if somebody wants to know, for example, this particular area I'm really interested in, I think we need to keep it together, and I'd like to know how many people are in there, talk to Jamie. So Jamie's going to be here, so she can, put a little, do her magic with this thing and figure out how many people are in there, or ask her questions, okay? Yes, please.
Maybe it's just me, but looking at these maps is so clueless,
Okay, well, we'll,
Question before we start with it? I'm just asking, I don't want to disrupt your agenda.
sure, no, no.
It's just really a 10-minute presentation and map without.
Okay, we're all going to be around. If it's some general questions, if you just want to ask some questions right now, we can do that. Or you can talk to us because we're going to be at the mapping stations. So we have Zach, who's going to be there. We have city attorney who's going to be there. And Jamie and I are going to be there. And our translator, who by now knows a whole lot about districting also, will also be able to answer questions because he's also been through this process. So if you think it's questions that everybody needs to hear, then I will give you the microphone.
I don't know anybody else on here, I just know it's my question.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we'll take a break, I'll talk to you, and if it's questions that I know are gonna be coming up from other people, then before we start with the public input, I will let everybody know. Does that sound okay? Yeah.
Is there a website that has populations or we have?
Yes, we just got a community viewer map site, also on the City of Oceanside website, so that went live today. And yeah, it's on, basically just go on City of Oceanside website and then click on the mapping part. So there is multiple different maps on there that have populations, okay? All right, so let's take a quick break and I will talk to you first. Okay, thank you.
I can just come and bring you a microphone, whichever you prefer. So without further ado, our first speaker will be Scott Ashton.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Ashton, and I'm the CEO of the Oceanside Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber is involved in this process because we believe it's important that the businesses in our city maintain strong representation. And, you know, our main concern is that the districts are drawn in such a way as to balance out the business community as much as possible amongst the 4 districts or however many districts there will end up being. We do understand that obviously the major constraint is balancing out the population of residents. So but within those constraints, as much as possible, we'd like to see the business population balanced out. One of the things I did is I took a database of about 1,300 Oceanside businesses and I dropped it into Google Maps. And one of the areas of concern is up in the northeast part of the city. There's very few businesses in that area. So what I just did with Jamie is she drew a boundary from here down to about Oceanside Boulevard, and that would allow that segment to catch quite a few businesses in the east part of Oceanside Boulevard. And it did fit within the population parameters of the 2,000, give or take, of the 41,000. So we just ask that that be taken into consideration in the drawing of the boundaries, and then throughout the rest of the city, the business population is pretty well balanced out. So, thank you.
Our next speaker is Richard Fox. Let's see where's,
Hello. I'm Richard Fox, lifetime resident, Oceanside. I was at the other meeting, and it's pretty interesting. I was looking at the different boundaries, thinking about the coast, okay? Not having just one person represent the coast, maybe be able to have the coast split into 2, 3, maybe 4 sections. I was thinking you could go easterly in different areas and maybe come out with districts, which means that the coast would have representation from maybe 4 different people instead of just one, and Coast Highway. Now, Jamie was kind enough to draw last week Oceanside Boulevard South to, which includes Lake and this and that, all the way to the east, and it came out within the 2,000 also. So now Scott's talking a district right here, and he said down to Oceanside Boulevard, which has the right numbers. So there almost could be 2 districts there, and maybe another district or 2 here, that trying to keep the coast from being just exactly one whole district. And then also, all these east-west corridors, the large streets, they're set. But a lot of the north-south ones need some work, need some changes, and things like that. So if you say drew districts this way, then you might have just one person representing that whole corridor instead of maybe having them split up a little bit. Just some thoughts.
Our next speaker is Clint Russell.
Hi, my name is Clint Russell. I've lived in the east side neighborhood of Oceanside for about 16 years, which is probably right about over there. For the last 16 years, I think that council districting in our city is a great idea. It will allow those of us that rarely have a voice an opportunity to have a go-to person or an advocate to express our concerns and needs within our neighborhoods, rather than having our voice diluted by big money lobbyists that typically control where most of the resources are allocated. Since we are one of the most diverse and the 3rd most populated city in San Diego County, it only seems fair that anyone that is qualified, regardless of their ethnicity or financial backing, should have an opportunity to run for city council. This will truly reflect the diversity that we all are so very proud of. I believe the council districts should be divided up fairly so there is a healthy amount of diversity within each district. We all have different needs and concerns within Oceanside, and I think this is the most equitable way to achieve this goal. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Jimmy Knott.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Knott, 127 Cherry Lane. Think everybody knows that for all the years. Live down South Oceanside, but I have a few questions. One, after the districts are established, how will the elections be held? What's going to happen? Is it going to be when the elections come up, or will it be all 4, or what's going to be taking place, or how many it was going to be? That's number 1. Number 2, why is there a limitation of 4 districts as mentioned in the presentation? If we look at the city right now, the fire department has 8 sectors or districts. Police department has more and sub-beats, and code enforcement as well. The city has already recognized a need for multiple divisions, more than 4. I supplied the staff here with the websites to give them the exact mapping of that. And I know that there are some other criteria for each one of these services, but there is a logic for that, and some of it has to do with population and service. So the prevalence for those divisions needs to be clarified and also included into the record. The next thing is equity of services like health, senior, recreation. That has not really been gone over. The maps that we have here do not really show that, nor does it show where the goods and services like stores are. Is each area, each district going to have the same access to stores? We don't know. Also, tax opportunities. Is one district going to take and have all the TOT? Is another district going to have all the sales tax? That has not been mapped out and shown onto any map either. If one district does, do they get to keep it? Do they take and have more prevalence? Do they get any edge on it? And finally, that needs to be fair and equitable. Finally, for some of the minority groups, there's one minority group in Oceanside that has real needs and has not been really, recognized. That's our Native Americans. And I can tell you the Luiseno people really need it because they have a, small tribe here. And I can tell you, like one of them, Charbonneau, John Baptiste Charbonneau, he was the first mayor of Oceanside. Yet we do not have one street, one park, or anything named after him. He was the child of Sacagawea. People don't realize, but that's the truth. But the reason why we don't recognize him, he complained to the governor then, and the governor said, if you don't like it, leave. He did. The governor didn't get the message.
Thanks, Jimmy. I'll speak to two of the questions that you had, just to give you guys a little bit of feedback. So the first question was, why are there only going to be 4 districts drawn? The reason for that is the timeline associated with the districts that need to be drawn. There's legal requirement that the city has to have all of these districts drawn and approved by August 1st, pending a lawsuit if we didn't finish it by that time frame. So in this particular redistricting process, we're not going to look at extending or expanding to additional seats. However, that doesn't prevent the city from doing that at a future time, say in 2020, 2022, but the additional costs associated with that and the timeline associated with that is the reason why there's only going to be 4 seats during this particular district process, but it doesn't prevent it from happening in the future. And your second question, Jimmy, I believe was, how will the elections be held? My understanding is how this is going to work out is how the districts will be drawn. The next 2 council members who are up for re-election in the upcoming 2018 election, if those council members somehow end up in different districts, those would probably be the seats that are up in the upcoming election. I would not anticipate that we would have 4 seats up for election in 2018 because legally we would be then cutting short 2 council members who were just re-elected, and we're not legally allowed to do that, and we're also simultaneously not allowed to add years onto other council members, so there won't be someone serving 6 years or someone serving 2 years. So that's my understanding of those 2 questions. With that being said, Rob Howard.
Mine is pretty quick. I didn't know we could actually get you to draw it up, but his comment about the beach access, not just 3, I would like to see all 4 literally have access coastal for 2 main reasons. One, the tourism and business piece. You would like to have every council member vested in that and all the citizens of the city vested in that. And I believe after looking at this map and looking at how the density would flow, now it would require long districts, but the city is only how wide? It's not like the person can't get from one end of the district to another to address those issues. And based on what Scott was saying, you could literally, where the businesses are broken out, the only one where it would seem to be difficult, because if they would move the district down here versus coming this way and coming there, you still would get you could still get the business piece addressed at the same time. But I do believe if you allow the tourism and the beach access piece to one council member, it does a disservice to the rest of the city and the residents, because I live in Oceanside because I'm 7 miles from the beach. I'm just going to tell you, that's why I'm here, and I would like to see those, each council member district have access to the beach, and you can keep those specific communities together. It would make long districts, but you got the streets running, Oceanside Boulevard, Mission, all of them going that way. 78, 76. So
Great. Thank you, Ron. Rob. Next, if anyone else who hasn't turned in a form would like to speak, you're more than welcome to at this time. And if it's questions or if you have public comment that you actually want to make, perfect, let me bring it over to you. And if you could just state your name when you speak, that would be great.
Diane Hansen, I'm just wondering if the ballot is going to look different.
Oh, the ballot? Yes, the ballot will look different because there will be, whereas currently when we have our city council elections, there are all the candidates for Oceanside City Council. The people who reside within the specified district will be receiving on the ballot basically the choice for District 1 council member. So if you live in, let's say, District 1 and your council member, your seat is up for re-election in 2018, that would be the one election cycle when you have the opportunity to vote for a city council member, and you wouldn't have the chance to vote again until 2022. So instead of voting for 4 council seats every election cycle, you'll be voting for 1 council seat every 4 years. Let me bring over the microphone. Oh, and the mayor, who's elected at large every 4 years. My apologies.
I have a question, too. I think Mr. Lowry and Mr. Kern, Councilman Kern and Councilman Lowry are up for re-election. What if they're not in their district?
So when it comes to Karin, who just answered this a little bit ago, is that we cannot take into consideration political interest or count candidates. So the districts will be drawn, and if the candidates who are currently in office reside in those districts, then those people would be up for re-election. But I'll let the city attorney give even more clarification on that.
So when the map comes out, the schedule that the city council adopted has a proposed map being made public no later than June 14th. It may be earlier than that. I believe Dr. McDonald's going to strive to have it out earlier, but assuming it's out June 14th, it'll also have a schedule for what offices would be up for 2018 and what would be up for the next election, so you'll know on that date.
Yeah, no, I'm good. David Neidiger, City of Oceanside, somewhere. I live here. The question is about the census tracts. 2020, we'll be having a whole new census drawn. Will we have to redo these things for the 2020? We will. And then every 10 years thereafter, we'll have to go through this whole process. Okay, so we're doing it. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, Joan? You can sit down if you want. It's easier.
Well,
yeah, either way.
Hi, I'm Joan Perro. I'm a citizen, a very happy, proud citizen that has moved from Chicago, who enjoys paradise here. I went to the council meeting and realized this is a huge, huge plan. And there's so much to discover and learn about. And they brought up things at the council meeting that were not mentioned here. And I know the council voted in favor of going with this. But there's a group of people who don't want to accept this, what's happening to so many cities in California. And it's because of an attorney in Malibu that evidently looked at a good way of making a lot of money for himself and other lawyers. And it seems that if you look at the way dividing up the city into 4 districts, you can only vote once in 4 years. And 1 or 2 people could run as a candidate from your district. And, well, if only 1 ran, you really wouldn't have a vote because that's your candidate, that's the person. And right now, we can vote for every council member that runs. And this takes away 75% of our voting power. And it's so important for us to guard over our voting ability, our freedom, and we have to be very careful and learn all we can learn about something. Now, a group of citizens have gone to several attorneys in the California area, and some of them are very interested in proceeding to find a way to overcome this. And so some of friends of mine have drawn up a petition and said it would be all right to bring it to the meeting today, and I asked you if it's all right to at least let people know about it. And so there's a number of whereases these things would happen to us, and I invite anybody that would like to look at it, and if they are in favor of it and be interested in pursuing this to find out more information. I have several petitions here, but it's so important to really think that it's unfair for one person to come up with a fabulous idea, and they go to the cities and send them a letter and say, all right, you have this short time before you can come up with an answer, or I'll sue you. And a number of cities, I don't know, 5 or 7 in Southern California have fought it and lost a lot of money in the courts. It's a lot of money. But what's important, our freedom, our ability to vote. Just because some smart guy has the nerve to present this and challenge cities and say, do it my way, or we'll find some way to sock it to you where you have to pay a lot of money. So if anybody is interested in exploring this idea, and I'm not trying to cause an uproar against the city, but we have to know what's going on completely. It's a very challenging situation, and we have to think what all is involved. A friend of mine said, okay, so if one person ran in my district, then really I don't have to vote because they've won it already. So guess what? Your vote is shot. You can't vote for anybody else. So think about it very carefully, okay? And as I say, I have a number of these petitions. If you're interested, we'd be glad to have you join us. But please stay alert and know what's going on all the time. Did you have a question for me?
Thank you, Joan. Thank you so much.
Well, I don't know if I could do too many things at the same time. Can't even see it up there.
I can look for you.
Okay, so is this on? I'm sorry, my ears are stuffed up. Can you hear me? I can't hear myself very well. Okay, I was at the meeting on Saturday, and I confided with everyone that I grew up on a farm. And when you are in an agricultural area that's a part of a district that has a large chunk of a population, you never really have a say in what goes on in your district. So with that in mind, I would like everyone just to keep in mind, if it would be possible for this agricultural area here, because I know that's a really low population, low density, to have the fewest number of voters in that district so that the agricultural voice is actually heard over the residential voices, or at least with the residential voices, whether they're contiguous here or contiguous all along the line with Camp Pendleton. Just something to keep in mind, because anybody here grow up on a farm? Yeah, you pay a lot of taxes and you never have much to say. Yeah, so that's, oh, and be sure you know about what's going on at the San Onofre nuclear generating station. I have some of this if you'd like to be interested.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, perfect. Let me come over this way. Start here.
Thank you. Jane Schweikart. I'm a very recent transplant from New Jersey. Just moved out here in February, and I'm very interested in this. I was just wondering, we had talked earlier, but is there any consideration about, in addition to the 4 district council people, to still have a number elected at large This way you have a chance to vote for 2 people.
I'd have the city attorney correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the rationale behind the potential lawsuit was to make sure that all of the city council members would be elected by district as opposed to at large. So I believe that's why they won't have that process. But that's my understanding. Is that correct? And the mayor is at large. I know the mayor is at large, but the city council. Yeah, and the clerk. There you go. And the treasurer. Yeah. There you go. There you go. Any other questions? Yeah, perfect. All right.
Thank you. Shelley Parker. I live in a mobile home park here. My question is, okay, so you said that it was possible to have more districts. Would that come in 2018, 2020? Would we have to wait till the next census to have that?
So my understanding, and Karin or the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe if that were to take place, it would definitely not happen in 2018 since these districts will go into effect for 2018. If it were to happen, it would more than likely happen after 2020. It's not a guaranteed plan that they're going forward with. However, if it were to transpire, it would happen after the next census in 2020. So it would either be 2022, or they might not do it at all, but that will be up to the city council. But if they were to go to additional seats, it would be after 2020.
So we as citizens could actually bring it up in front of the city council and ask them to do it and see, okay.
Yes, most definitely. You could definitely request that of the city council. Definitely. Any other people want to speak or have any questions at all? Oh, there you go. All right.
Conrad Beck, the father of this guy. I've got some little ideas on different ways to draw the boundaries, but we don't have to go into that right now. My question was, how would we ensure, is there residency time a council member would have to live in that district, and how would we ensure that they do live in that district? Because unfortunately there was a thing not too long ago where somebody didn't even live in Oceanside.
Great question, Dad. All right. I like it. Once again, I'll rely on the... No. I'll rely on the city attorney a little bit, but my understanding is that there's a nomination period, and I'll come up here. There's a nomination period for every elected office in the city of Oceanside, and my understanding is that you're only legally required to live within that district at that particular nomination time. So that time for the 2018 election is the middle of July to the middle of August. So as long as you're a registered voter and a resident in that particular district at that time, you would then be eligible to run for office. As far as verifying addresses, yes, there was potentially an issue with the city treasurer previously. That would be followed up by the registrar of voters, who would determine the validity of someone's address and making sure they compare that with their registration information to make sure they're eligible to run for office. But we may even look into additional measures from my office to verify that further because of the previous issue we had with the last city treasurer. Yes.
So again, everybody gets to vote for treasurer, mayor, and the clerk. Okay, and then our district. Okay, all right.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, Gerald Hampton. Just a quick follow-up to that question for clarification. Does that mean that individual in the district, that council person, they only have to be a resident during that nomination period or during the course of their time as a council person?
Great clarification. Yes, they would have to remain in that district during their entire time. So it's actually a big-time federal offense if you're not living in the city or in the district during that time. But you would have to begin your residency during that nomination period at the latest. City Attorney Mullen, anything you want to add to that? All right, cool. All right, anything else? Any other questions? Any other insights or anything? Yes, perfect.
Hello everyone, my name is Diana and I'm from Oceanside here, off Oceanside Boulevard. Just to go with the lady that brought the petitions, I kind of did an internship with the ACLU back in Escondido and a couple years back with the districting, and I helped create that. So if you know a little bit of the lawsuit, It was in order to bring more representation of the population. If you look at our city council, it's mostly white males and one female that's Latina. And if you look at our population of Oceanside, it's not very representative of city council. So I think that's basically what the lawsuit is about. You keep your city councils accountable by representing that district, and that's the whole point of the lawsuit. I just wanted to educate everybody on why the lawsuit was brought up, and then that's kind of like misleading of her petition request, I guess.
Thank you for that insight. Wonderful. Karin, is there anything else that you would like to add? Or any other questions, comments, or concerns? Great. Karin, anything else you'd like to add?
I suppose just I'd just like to urge you one more time to please just tell us about your neighborhoods, your communities of interest. If you don't want to speak here, that's totally fine. Please just fill out these forms as legibly as possible, please, and with as much detail as you can, in particular about the boundaries, so that we can have them digitized and Jamie doesn't have to text me at 3 in the morning and go, "Can you look at this? What does this mean? What street is this?" And then on Saturday, we can actually, start building some districts. So please just leave your forms here and also email us, please. Thank you. Yeah, and tomorrow also, but yeah, just for, Saturday, because we're going to start.
One second here.
Is it possible to take blanks back to the community and kind of get them going?
Most definitely. So by all means, I will be more than happy to give you all the ones that we have printed out right now. Yeah, and we have them on the website. You can print it out right there. And then you can turn those forms into my office. You can either turn them in physically, if you want to scan it and send it, or email, and then we'll get those to Karin. In addition, we have another public hearing tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. at the City Council chambers. And then we're going to have another public meeting this upcoming Saturday at Melba Bishop Park, then the following Tuesday at Lake Elementary, and then our last one is the community rooms on May 30th. So a lot of good meetings, and please let your neighbors, let your friends know to get those forms turned back in, because that's really going to be essential for what Karin and Jamie do when they're putting this information together. Thank you again for coming out. Oh, yes. Sure.
My name's Gilda Warnamundi. This is an important issue for all of us, and I don't see a large amount of people here. I'm curious, what was your first meeting like? Was there a lot of people?
I would say about the same. Yeah, probably around 40 or 50 people, roughly. So to give you some insight, we did do a public service announcement, a special program on KOCT. We did advertise it through all of the Oceanside Unified School Districts, so every parent of a student got a letter. So we've done as much as we could as far as public outreach, but we want to do more. So anything you can do to help by encouraging your friends and family to come would be very helpful. Yes, tomorrow is the second reading of this at the City Council. So they won't be voting on anything. It's just their second hearing on this 6 p.m. at the City Council chambers.
So there's not going to be a map made available yet. We have 4 public hearings. We have 4 public hearings through the City Council and 5 community outreach meetings. This is the second of the 5 community outreach meetings. Tomorrow night is the second of the 4 council meetings. We'll ultimately have a draft map available at the 3rd City Council meeting, and that's where they will give some direction. That'll be on July 25th, I think is the date. Okay.
Richard, yes.
June 21st.
June 21st. July 25th is the reading.
June 21st. Will you be taking public input tomorrow night?
Yes. Tomorrow night there's public input as well, and that'll be part of the minutes in the record. All right, Victor?
Okay, I appreciate everybody being here, and the comments being made are great. The one thing I haven't heard addressed is, once the district lines are drawn, proposed, what is the appeal process if your community has been divided or you think your community should be moved to a different district?
I guess I get that one. Thanks, Zach. So a draft map will be made available no later than June 14th. Then there will be a City Council hearing, so you can come and testify in front of the City Council and provide your comments on June 21st. And then the council will make whatever direction they want to make at that time. If there's any changes, then it will be brought back on July 25th. The council will be in legislative recess during that time period between the 21st and the 25th. And then finally, there would be the adoption of the ordinance on August 1st. So you have multiple opportunities to testify in front of the city council to address your concerns.
And my biggest,
Real quick, on the comment period, you're saying we have multiple opportunities to address the council, but once the draft is presented, can we simply submit those if we can't make those meetings? See, one of the reasons is the time frame of work schedules and things. Can we submit them online?
Yes.
To each council member?
Yes, so there is Zach, do you want to bring up the email address that you have?
Yeah.
On one of the PowerPoint slides, we have the email address.
So it's
on the city's website.
And it's on all of the forms that you have. It's districtelections@ci.oceanside.ca.
So June 14th, the map's made available no later than that date, then you could provide whatever comments you want from that point on.
Yeah, and then just send those to me, and then we'll make sure that Karen and the city council gets those. Any other questions or insight? Great. Thank you guys so much for being here. Hope to see you at the council meeting tomorrow and on Saturday at Mel Bishop Park. Have a great night. Thank you so much. You turn your white forms in if you have them. Turn them in to myself.